and welcome to Inside OUSD. I'm John Sasaki. In this show, we'll help you learn a little bit about the inner workings of the school district. We're going to talk about the district's strategic plan with Superintendent Kyla Johnson-Trammell. Thanks for joining us. Now, before we start, I want our viewers to get to know you a little bit. You are an Oakland native from a family of educators. Tell us a little bit more about your life and what led you to being our superintendent.
Well, Oakland, and as we all know, Oaktown is how we call it around here, born and bred. Raised in East Oakland, and I thought originally the last thing that I would be doing would be education, coming from a long line of educators. But I always found myself working with children, always found myself working in schools. Even in college in West Philadelphia, I got involved in AmeriCorps, was a tutor. I worked with middle school students who were incarcerated, worked in the local high school in West Philadelphia. So I think the spirit in many ways knew that education was in my blood long before I did. And so found my way back to Oakland and taught. And then I think I was just bit by the leadership bug. And this was never a career in terms of being a superintendent that I intentionally planned for. Just experiences and circumstances and opportunities led me to where I am today.
Fantastic. So, I mean, professionally, you really grew up here in the district.
Absolutely. I've spent the majority of my career in the district outside of being an assistant principal of a middle school in Concord in Mount Diablo School District for 2 years.
So principal and all the other leadership roles.
Exactly. Just walking the ladder in the pipeline.
Fantastic. All right, so let's get started. So explain what a strategic plan is and why the district needs one.
So a strategic plan is really a way of creating a roadmap of how in an organization you're trying to realize your vision. So our mission and vision, and one of the first things that I made clear coming in is knowing the history of the instability of leadership in the district. I felt it important to keep our vision and mission. I was a part of creating the vision and mission. I knew how important it was not only to the school community but larger Oakland to really stay focused on creating a full-service community school district and really working to make sure our kids are college, career, and community ready. The strategic plan is a way of saying, okay, what are we doing in the next 3 years, 5 years to actually work to realize that for all of students.
Very good. Now, there are 4 pillars in the strategic plan.
Yes.
Let's talk about them. Now, what does it mean to have strong readers by the 3rd grade, and why is that so important?
Well, literacy is really the foundation of everything. And although we're focusing on reading, one important part of a strategic plan is trying to be focused so that you can get movement. But reading is a part of literacy. And for literacy in the 21st century, it's everything including reading, writing, speaking, listening, and communicating. And so those are the foundation building blocks no matter what career a student is going to have. And what we're seeing with the disruption of technology is we can't predict the jobs that are going to be here 5 years, 15 years, but we can predict and rest assured that having strong literacy skills in all of those dimensions, including digital literacy, is going to be the building block of a kid being successful.
And what's so key about the 3rd grade?
3rd grade is really the age that we want to make sure kids have the skills to actually to read, so that they're really spending from 3rd grade on using reading as the mechanism to learn. So in education, a lot of times we say from preschool to 3rd grade is when kids are learning to read. From 3rd grade on is when kids are reading to learn. And the extent that kids are struggling, it's not impossible. Of course, kids can catch up, but it becomes more challenging. And particularly when we're thinking from an equity standpoint in who in Oakland, across the state and the nation aren't reading. And knowing that a lot of our strategic plan is grounded in equity, really focusing on 3rd grade and what we need to do up until 3rd grade is an area of focus.
And this is one of those things, it's about a village raising the child.
Absolutely.
And it takes everybody. It's the family, it's the schools, it's the community organizations that we work with, because everybody really is focused on literacy here in Oakland.
That's right. And see, John, you are articulating the mission, right? Which is, it's not just community school for our health and wellness. It's really thinking academically around how as a village we wrap around what our students need to get the skills and the support for them to be successful academically.
Very good. All right. The next pillar is empowered graduates.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Empowered graduates really means we want kids to leave school. The amount of careers that any kid is going to have after high school will probably change numerous times, but to leave with a plan in mind of where they want to go after high school. So the first part of that obviously is making sure that they're academically prepared. And that's one of the reasons we're not only monitoring graduation rates, but the extent that kids are graduating with what we call A to G completion, being able to attend a college, whether it's starting with community college, going 4 years, taking career technical education courses, but being able to be ready to attend college. But we also talk about career. And so being ready for the world of work is another skill set. And for kids, and even though it's a high school focus, we're really trying to drive down even in middle and elementary. And elementary, having kids really think about exposing them to careers. Middle school, start thinking a little deeper and being in a theme-based pathway. So if a kid enters a school and the health pathway, they're really thinking about all the different careers. It may be a doctor, it may be a nurse, but it may be policy. There's so many offshoots in healthcare that we want kids to be able to make a plan, have goals, have exposure, have internships. In some cases, perhaps they want to start taking classes through dual enrollment to actually start getting prepared for college. So being more intentional around not just preparing kids to get in college, but then thinking through the plan to graduate and to be able to land employment.
And you mentioned the pathways, and most of our kids in high school are in pathways.
That's right.
And that's a direct result of Measure N,
That's right.
which provided us the funding to do these pathways. And it really has increased the graduation rates and all that, right?
It's increased the graduation rate. It's increased our A to G rate, even though there's more to go. And it's increased the opportunities many of our kids have had to exposing them through apprenticeships, just the different careers that are out there.
Very good. All right, the next one is joyful schools.
Yeah.
This is maybe my favorite one of the
Yes.
whole strategic plan. What is a joyful school, and why is that so important to kids?
Well, one, we want school not to just be about education, really thinking about learning. For me, that is so important because we all know, think about the learning we still do in our careers. I'm learning all the times. I'm in networks, I'm reading, podcasts. And so to be able to nurture that skill early on, that you never stop learning. That's how you grow, that's how you become effective, and you're successful in all aspects of your life. And we want learning to be joyful. We want kids to be curious. And so really thinking about that through the curriculum, through the experiences, so that kids are excited to come to school. We want them to be on fire about their educational journey. But it's also in the actual physical environment and thinking about the facilities we have, the greening we're doing of yards, outdoor classrooms, playgrounds, thinking about the equipment, right? The way that the environment looks. We know we're motivated by our eyes and what we see. And most importantly, particularly given the pandemic and all that many of our students have gone through, is really thinking about the school culture and school climate, making sure schools have what they need to create a greater sense of belonging, and knowing that we intentionally want to focus on our most vulnerable and make sure that those students and families, all, but in particular where we're hearing, all of our schools, we're not feeling inclusive everywhere, that's an area of focus.
Lastly, powering everything we do in OUSD is our amazing staff. And
Yeah.
so why is the fourth pillar having a diverse and stable workforce, and why is that so important?
When I think about my own educational experience, in particular math, I never had, besides my second grade teacher, a math teacher that looked like me. And a lot of who you see in education, and I'd say particularly if you're first gen, it really seeps into you feeling, are those areas, right, where I belong? And so when we think particularly where we're seeing so much growth in the workforce, STEM is a huge area, right? And so a lot of our kids of color don't necessarily connect that place of work is for them. It's hard to actually have long-lasting careers in STEM if you don't have a strong foundation in math and science. This is just one example. And so that's not going to happen overnight. Most school districts across the United States are largely not of color. And this isn't to say that someone who's not of color cannot teach our kids. That's not the purpose of that focus. It's that we know from research, actually, that when kids of color see people that look like them, they're more likely to form meaningful relationships to help them see themselves, not only in a socio-emotional sense, but in an academic sense. And we know that have those meaningful relationships specifically for African American, Latino students, Asian Pacific Islanders makes a difference. We have it as a strategic plan for several reasons. One, the Bay Area is hell of expensive. And so we know, again, back to our community school mission, we need the community to help us figure out housing, right, to help us figure out other supports for our educators. And we're doing lots of work with our foundations and even some of our state policy to create pipelines so that some of our folks, we've had custodians, we've had paraprofessionals that are now teachers, so that we're really able to help to support educators from the community teach our children.
Now, two final questions for you. This is a lot of stuff we're talking about here.
Yeah.
The 4 pillars, it's just an enormous amount of work. How difficult will it be to do all of that given our financial limitations as a school district?
It's challenging, but it's never impossible without a vision. Again, back to the importance of a strategic plan and a vision, and having the community support that vision. It's no surprise, as California, we've dropped tremendously in terms of our per pupil funding since Prop 13. And so that's work collectively as a city and as a state that we need to do to really put our money where our mouth is in terms of making sure every student has what they need. Until then, Oakland continues to do a lot of creative partnerships so that where we don't have funding internally, we're able to partner with our business community and with our funders and partnerships. It is definitely an obstacle, but we continue to persist and really using our strategic plan and our mission vision as our North Star of where we need to go.
Very good. Now, all these items on the strategic plan seem like the kind of thing that all districts, including OUSD, would be doing under normal circumstances, focusing on literacy, focusing on having a stable, diverse staff. What's different about this strategic plan? How have we now taken this specific focus on these things?
Well, I'd say two things. One difference is our strategic plan document is actually quite short. We heard from the community the importance of focus so that we can implement better. And not changing directions, right? When you think about the number of directions and visions, not necessarily visions, but strategic plans that we've had, really a lot of what we heard from the larger community in schools is we want to focus and see much of our work through. So I would say that's one change. Two is really articulating that we're grounding the strategic plan in Black and Brown excellence. So of course it's thinking about literacy for all, but it's trying to get underneath what has caused the persistent underachievement of Black and Brown students in terms of reading, and being intentional about working towards ensuring that all of our decisions in terms of financing, in terms of direction, is really anchored towards having some accelerated outcomes for those students. And then I would say finally, a lot of our implementation continuing to take our mission, which is around what are the various ways we can continue to have the community support us in carrying these things through.
Great. All right. Well, thank you very much for sharing that perspective on the strategic plan. Appreciate that. Thank you for joining us. Join us next time for another episode of Inside OUSD.